classes. Welcome back. We're looking at Dylan B. Vanderschiff and a paper he wrote titled The Ethical Experience of Nature, Aristotle and the Roots of Ecological Phenomenology. He is from Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada. So Vanderschiff basically is looking at the teleological conception of nature. We might term that purposeful conception of nature, and how such a view of nature is misunderstood by our modern scientific framework, and how this ties into the experiential angle on the way that environmental ethics is understood and practiced. Okay, so to be sure, he's working with a lot of Greek terms, so as we go along, I'll try to be defining those. So, like, for example, with the term teleological, meaning purposeful, that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm only having you read the abstract, and I believe it's pages 99 to 105. Okay, so very short reading, but still rather dense. So basically, we start out with this way that Aristotle is writing about how we want to know things. Okay, so I'm paraphrasing and quoting here. So we all desire to know, and indication of this is the delight we take in our senses, for even apart from their usefulness, they are loved for themselves, and their usefulness is our senses. They are loved for themselves. Our senses are loved for themselves. Above all others, the sense of sight. So science and art are arrived at via experience. And this is from the metaphysics. Okay, so this is basically how it is that we start our understanding, is that we desire to know, and that the desire to know is synonymous with this sense of sight, right? So the philosopher Aristotle, born in 384 BC, died in 322, so he was roughly 62 years old. We would refer to him as a polymath. In other words, he studied a lot and wrote on a large number of subjects, to the degree that a lot of what's available to us today is actually only a small fraction of what he wrote. And even then, what he has published now is extensive. So he wrote anywhere from zoology to logic, from rhetoric to mathematics, etc. Okay, so our Western intellectual tradition owes a debt of gratitude to Aristotle. So his influence really is enormous. So in a way, Aristotle's teaching and his philosophy is a culmination of what preceded him. Okay, so the great Plato and Socrates, including the pre-Socratics. So when we're considering the pre-Socratics and Plato and Socrates, we could also see Aristotle as a culmination of the pre-Socratics, Plato and Socrates. Okay, so then, as Vanderschiff indicates, although Aristotle's influence on philosophy and natural science was important in the ancient world, it was also just as important on into the medieval world, with such thinkers as St. Thomas Aquinas, of whom we'll be looking at when we look at natural law theory in ethics. Okay, and then so Aristotle's influence was challenged and overturned then. Okay, with the scientific revolution. Okay, so beginning with modern science, with such figures as Copernicus, Galileo, Sir Isaac Newton, etc., in the 17th century. Okay, so Vanderschiff wishes then to uncover an understanding of Aristotle away from a Christian context, and also the restricted view of positive science. Okay, so that point is key. So what do we mean when we're referring to positive positive science? Really has to do with positive here is meant to denote known empirically or known by perception. So that should cue us in back to Hume and the empiricists. Okay, so when we know something positively, we know it empirically by way of the senses, and that this way of positive thinking was favored in the scientific revolution to be something that displaced Aristotle to the degree that this is something that we have to take into consideration as van der Schyff is pointing out as a perhaps problem, in the sense that we would do well to start including these parts that positive science thought were not relevant in the case of in the cases that we'll look at, primarily with this idea of final causes and such. Okay, so van der Schyff focuses on the term for the most part or in general as important for Aristotle. And that should cue us into this idea that Aristotle's always thinking in terms of the universal to the particular. So this idea of the general as important, or for the most part, this phrase that van der Schyff focuses on, is important for our understanding of Aristotle as his methodology working from the universals to the particulars. Okay, so this is to exemplify the notion that Aristotle's thinking tends from the universal to the specific. So the understanding of things is subsumed and taken under following certain laws in general. Okay, so in other words, that's important because it's showing us that in order to understand things, we must also understand general laws that govern those things. And that's what we're looking at here, which is important, right? So in other words, in general is what van der Schyff is keying into as important. Okay, so yet we are usually mistaken when we in our positive science assume that something is to be known in its entirety as a whole. It must always be for the most part, or no matter the specificity. So in other words, no matter the specification we could have by knowing by way of our senses and our perception, that still shouldn't cloud our view into thinking that we can have a complete sense of things. That's a problem of positive science, is that we sometimes might think that we'll have a complete sense of things once we have full perception. And in a way, it goes beyond perception, really is the point here. Okay, so our understanding of anything must be subject to corrigibility, in other words, capable of being corrected, reformed, or improved. Okay, so there's always room for improvement is a great point, right? So first and foremost, we must consider Aristotle as a philosopher of looking at, so contemplating. So that's where that word theoreia comes in, that Greek word theoreia. It looks like theory. So obviously our word for theory, the way in which we understand how something works, or the way that we would explain the working of an idea would be theory, right? So that for Aristotle meant contemplating, even studying, okay? So, but also going to work at understanding the phenomena of something, okay? So theoreia has this kind of rich meaning. So yes, we know the world by way of our senses, by sight, yet sight and seeing is also a metaphor for learning and the acquisition of knowledge and understanding. Okay, so knowing the meaning of things is a way that we understand seeing to be, right? So seeing things as they are for the most part. Okay, so that's why it's tricky, because what we're looking at is that expansion of that verb, right? When we're thinking of saying, we could also be thinking of seeing. So we wish to contemplate, we engage with the theoria to see things, nature and ourselves with reason and knowledge. So that is objective, exterior, communal, and interrelated. Okay, so the it's not enough to know what the causes of things are materially only. Okay, so it's not enough to know what the causes of things are strictly on a materialist basis, is van der Schiff's point that we'd want to see with Aristotle. Okay, so that's important because it's showing us that that's what we do in positive science usually, is we think that a material understanding of something is going to give us a complete understanding. And so the point here is that that view is too limited. Okay, we're wanting to go to a more expansive view of Aristotle and are thinking about what we can know positively. So what is something's purpose is the same as asking what is its telos. Okay, so that word telos is a Greek word based roughly meaning aim or purpose. Okay, so in other words, what is something's telos is like asking what is its aim. Okay, so the why don't we go ahead and pause it here, and I'm going to start the second video. Take a breath and talk to you in just a bit.